Well, welcome to episode 2 of the Life's Worth Living podcast. I'm your host, John Gossett, and again, we're grateful to GTM Builders for putting on this podcast and allowing us to have a home in their model home here in Overlake. GTM Builders is Tooele County's premier home builder, and so big shout out to them. So we talked last week that in this podcast, we're going to be talking about some amazing people that have lived and excelled and got through their struggles. And we've talked about, we're going to discuss some mental health issues, and we're going to, everything that comes along with those things. And so tonight, we've got my favorite person on the planet. We've got Taryn Hiatt, who is the director of AFSP Utah, Nevada. And she's kind of a big deal.
Not a big deal.
She's all being quiet about it. No, seriously, I asked her to be my guinea pig because, as you know, we're new at this, and we're trying to work out all the bugs and know what we're doing. And I needed somebody that I could have a conversation with that wouldn't stress me out. And so Taryn is awesome. But I want to tell you a little bit about her. Her life has kind of been a lesson in service. And in mourning with those that mourn. You throw your little scripture in there, but really we've been told to mourn with those that mourn, and I think there's a big difference in mourning with those that mourn and mourning for those that mourn.
True.
So when I think about that, I think about Taryn because I've actually watched her mourn with those that mourn. And I think it's pretty awesome what she does. She spent countless hours advocating for suicide prevention in the state of Utah as well as Nevada. But, when she goes up to the Capitol, and I've seen her up at the Capitol, she gets the attention of everybody because she's a force to be reckoned with, right?
A loud mouth.
She's so loud. So, anyhow, when she speaks, people are captivated. She's been an inspiration to many, including myself. She's my hero, and I love this lady. So, with no further ado, now it's all on you.
Oh, great.
So,
thank you, though. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you saying that.
Well, we think the world of you, so.
Yeah, thank you.
You know that. I thought about, I know a lot about her, but as I told everybody on the podcast, I'm going to be introducing friends, and you're probably the same. Through working in prevention, your circle of friends gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the one thing that stood out to me when I met Taryn was a lot of people in prevention are territorial. And they say, well, this is my deal, this is what I do good at, and I don't want you messing up what I'm doing. And Taryn welcomed me with open arms, and I think that example that you set for others, I've tried to do the same thing with other people and let them know we're all in this together. I mean, it doesn't matter who you're with or what you're doing. The idea is that we're going to solve the problem, right?
Yep, for
we
sure.
do it together. So
all hands on deck.
Exactly. So I'm going to ask you some hard questions.
All
no,
right.
I'm teasing. I want everybody to get a taste of who Taryn is, and so I kind of want to hear your story. So take me back to the first time that suicide entered your mind as a word, or as when it became something that you understood.
Sure. For me, it really started as a little kid. I was 8 years old and did what a lot of kids, obviously, in Utah and of the LDS faith did. And I got baptized, and I remember, the dialogue I had with that ecclesiastical leader, right, being interviewed and answering this, series of questions, and him talking to me about sinfulness and how now I'd be accountable for my actions and that this would wash me clean. And so I kind of, okay, as a little kid, really, that kind of conversation's heavy. It was weird to me, and it was strange to me, and I remember just going, okay. But I did it, and then within a period of time, and I don't know exactly when, I'd started being sexually abused by a neighbor of mine. And it wasn't just any neighbor, it was a really good family friend, and it was a female. And so it was different on a lot of levels than I think what maybe most people would experience or think about as sexual abuse. And I knew what was happening shouldn't be. I didn't know how to stop it. I wanted it to stop. And so that was the first time in my mind that suicide would enter. Again, I didn't know what suicide meant. Like, I didn't have a definition of the word. I just knew I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to the things that were happening, I wanted to stop, but I didn't know how to stop them. So it seemed like if I was gone, then that would stop them. And so
you were 8 years old.
I was 8 years old.
So I mean,
you know,
what can you do at 8 years old?
Yep. So that was kind of my first, introduction, I guess, and experience. I didn't act on the thought. I just had them. And it wasn't until I was 12 when my parents would go through a divorce. We had to move. I mean, just life kind of turned upside down. And that's when I had my first attempt that ended me up in a psych ward and in a hospital.
Age 12.
Age 12. Yep,
So now when we're looking at the kids that struggle and we've talked about the youngest and the oldest and things, but it makes you understand that this isn't something that just happens in high school. No. And I always get asked, when do I start talking to my kid and how early? I said, you can talk to them as early as you want. Introduce the concept that if they're ever struggling with something that seems so painful that they feel like they can't do it or can't be here, to talk to you about it. I didn't know who to talk to about what I was thinking or feeling, and so I kept it to myself and I kept it hidden. And when I was hospitalized, that was a good thing, because for the first time it gave me a chance to talk about what had happened. I had to sit in a group, and my therapist would not let me leave without saying, to the point that sometimes it was argumentative, and I hated him. But he made me get honest and really open up about what had been going on, so that I could do something about it and figure out how to get through it instead of staying stuck in it. And I think your story, although it's unique to you, I think people would be surprised how often that happens.
For sure.
I mean, many times a family member, many times somebody in your circle of trust, and now all my kids are grown. Now I think back what I could do differently, and there's a
for sure, a lot. They say
I got 4 kids. I've only screwed up 3 of them, so. We're at 25%.
One in 3. 1 in 3 will experience abuse. And I remember, though, that's an interesting point you bring up, because I remember thinking that I was the only one, right? Nobody else was experiencing what I was experiencing. But as soon as I sat in that group setting and opened my mouth, everybody else in the group said similar things. And I learned real quick, I'm not the only one.
No.
This happens to other people, too. And there was comfort in that. There was comfort in knowing that other people had experienced what I had, and they were getting through it, so I could get through it.
So after your time in the hospital at age 12, was that kind of the end of it?
No. I wish I could say it was. I also lived with a father who suffered from really severe depression, and we didn't know that that's what it was. I saw my dad be physically ill. I just knew he wasn't well. His depression manifested in a lot of physical illness, and so I watched him struggle my whole life, and had an attempt that I would learn later was an attempt. I'd found him overdosed and unsure as to what had happened as a kid. We got him help, and he kind of went on about his way. But, I still struggled with thoughts of suicide. It was still something in my reality. I ended up getting into drugs and alcohol, after I got out of that psych ward, because while I had learned some tools, I still had a lot of guilt and shame and pain, and I didn't know what to do with that. And so I quickly found a way to relieve that. And for me, it was alcohol and drugs.
What age did that start for you?
So for me, it was 12. It was around the same age. I'd had a back surgery as a 12-year-old to correct scoliosis, and so I was introduced to morphine. So right away, I knew, hey, if I take these, this makes me feel better. And so I chased that feeling for a long time. And then I ended up getting raped when I was 15, and so that put me back into kind of a spiral of where I just didn't want to be here, just not well. And at that time, my dad, too, was struggling, pretty severely, and so it was kind of interesting. We shared this, similar journey. My, obviously, struggles were different than his, but we were very parallel in our experience. And so I didn't attempt again. But I lived with those thoughts. I always tell people, drugs and alcohol kept me alive. They kept me from killing myself because I wanted to. I wanted to. I just didn't. I didn't go through with it because I had other solutions at that time that kind of kept me safe. But then when I was 26, again, lots of just yucky stuff had been going on, is when my dad would die by suicide. And so that obviously brought it way back to the forefront of my mind of, oh my gosh, what is happening, what's going on.
Now, before you tell me about your dad, because I kind of know that story, but How many siblings do you have?
I have 4 other siblings, so I have 2 brothers, 2 sisters.
And not to have you tell their story, but I mean,
No, for
did any
sure.
of them go down that same path?
No,
of
not to the extent
feeling
I
that
did.
same way?
No, not to the extent I did at all. My little brother, I mean, my sisters both have experienced depression, and I have both brothers that are in the Marine Corps, and I'm sure they've had their own experiences with things that they witnessed and had to see and do, but not to the depth of kind of where I went with it, for sure.
And so at 26, were you married? And
I was not. No, I was just a single mother. I was
Okay.
really good at getting pregnant, but I was never good at getting married. So I had 2 kids
that's
by
okay.
this point.
That's all
I
right.
had 2 kids by this point,
So
but I was a
26 years
single mom.
old,
Yep.
single mom.
I had a 5-year-old, and Caitlin had just turned 2, so they were just little.
And tell me, how did you receive that information about your dad?
Well, so interestingly enough, and not, I always again think this is one of those kind of God moments, is what I refer to it as, is my dad had attempted a prior time back in 97 when I was, 20. Colin was just a baby at that time, and we were living with him, and he survived that attempt. And again, like, we just went on as business as usual. It was like we didn't address it, we didn't talk about it. He came home from a hospital stay for a long period of time because of the extent of his injuries, but we just like went back to life. It was like nobody said, hey,
Yeah.
like, are you okay? You just tried to kill yourself. Like, we didn't even talk about it, and
Not
because
even
we
in
didn't
the
know
hall.
how. No. And that's one of those things I always kicked myself. And so the next few years, he just was in this awful trajectory, and we knew he wasn't well, but we didn't know how to help him, and how, what do you do when you see somebody that you love struggle the way he struggled. And he was severely addicted to a multitude of medications because he'd had 22 surgeries over the course of his life. And so in those weeks leading up to his death, he was definitely despondent, definitely suicidal. We knew, but again, we just didn't know how to help him. We didn't want to get him in trouble. We didn't want to have him go to jail. We didn't want to have him do the things that we knew they would do if we told, thinking we were protecting him. And so I had gone out with some friends on a Saturday night and got home and was sitting on my porch, and it was about 2 a.m, and my phone rang, and I look, and it's my dad, and I think, oh great, he's probably upset or high, because he would call me all high on Ambien and not know what was going on. I mean, that was just what I had dealt with for years, and so I just thought, oh, it's going to be one of those calls. I'm not answering it, so I ignored it and went on to bed. And then as I got up the next morning, I knew something wasn't okay. But I had a job, I drove myself to work, it was our biggest sale of the year, my boss will tell you. And I got there, and just had that feeling that wouldn't leave, that said, you need to go check on your dad. And so I remember going into her office and just saying, hey, listen, I've tried to call him, I have this feeling he's not okay, and I just need to go. And she was adamant, you can't. And I said, I can. And I left, and I drove all the way up State Street to his home. And my dad used to always tell me as a teenager, he'd always say, I'm like Tom Bodette, I'll leave the light on for you. So every time if I'd go out, our light was always on when we'd get home. And so I remember pulling into his house, and the light was on. And so my first instinct was, okay, he's fine. It's like, you're being silly. And I got out, knocked on the door, and he didn't answer. And so then I opened the door, and I had this distinct impression and a literal voice come into my ears, and it just said, Taryn, there's 5 steps in front of you. You're going to walk down 5 steps. I was like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it said, Taryn, you're going to turn to the right, and when you do, you're going to see your dad. He's dead, but he needs you. And that's what I heard, and I just remember thinking, oh no, do I turn? But I did, and as I turned, obviously I saw him, and he was gone, but I ran to him and tried to wake him, tried to rouse him. I knew, because of what I was experiencing, that it was too late. So then I started doing where's my phone, where's, calling for help, and called 911, and just remember fumbling through, the address. I don't know, I didn't give them the right one. They ended up going to the house down the street, and of course I had to run outside and scream, I'm over here! And they came to the right one. But it was a bittersweet experience that I got to be the one to find him. And I say that because of how many times my dad had found me.
Yeah.
You know, I had multiple attempts as a teenager. That one just happened to land me in the hospital, you know, but he had found me multiple times in states where my life was in jeopardy and thankfully saved me, you know. And so I was grateful that it wasn't a stranger. It wasn't any of my other siblings. It was me. It was Taryn, and I got to have that moment. And so it was awful and horrible, but bittersweet at the same time, you know, too.
Well, and as terrible as that is to go through, that really has been kind of the catalyst that's driven you to do what you do.
Oh, for sure. You know, I just remember, I mean, this was in 2002, you know, this was a while ago, and the landscape was very different than it is today. It was, you know, we still see some of those same similarities, but, you know, our family was devastated and didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to say. You know, what do you tell people? Do we say what he did? We knew he'd killed himself, but is that what we tell people, or do we pretend it was something else? And we weren't the only family struggling with those kinds of conversations, you know, and I felt bad. And I remember just saying, no, like, we're going to be honest. Like, we've never talked about anything he's gone through his whole life. Like, enough is enough. We're going to own it, and we're going to be honest. And so I started searching, you know, for support groups or people or just others, right? And I remember getting on my computer one night, and it was back in the day of AOL dial-up, so it took a minute. But I was searching for resources, and I came across AFSP. So it's definitely what moved me in a direction to
And what a blessing that's
find
been.
resources.
I mean, really, what a blessing that's been to the state of Utah.
Yeah.
Because you've been in the forefront. Everybody else is trying to keep up with you. And I think it's amazing how proud your dad would be.
Thank you for saying that. You know, I think of that a lot. I think there are a lot of people who lived because he couldn't.
Absolutely.
And that was the goal, right? That was what you wanted, is, you know, because
Yep.
you do this work. You think, if I can spare one other family from
going
having
through.
to go through this, it's worth it. And I will do anything I can to do that. And so that's been the mission ever since.
And so I guess going back to that day, I mean, we can look back, you know, what's it been? Almost 20 years.
Yeah.
18 years
18
ago.
years.
18 years ago, you can look back now and you can say, okay, now having the knowledge I have, if I were to redo it, but we always talk about there's no woulda, coulda, shouldas. You do the best you can with what you've been given. And that's the one thing that I recognize with every family we work with. As they go through that thing and they're saying, gosh, I just didn't see the signs. Or I didn't think it was that bad, or whatever they say. We're sitting in a different position now because we have that training. And so I think that's the tough thing, is trying to let the people know, let's get you trained.
Yeah.
Because it's never going to happen in their family.
Yeah.
It's always going to happen somewhere else, but not in their own family. And so I think that's one thing that you've been amazing at, is, so you teach Talk Saves Lives, QPR, Safe Talk.
Anything suicide prevention.
She'll
Mental
do
health
it.
first aid, Connect, you name it, we teach it.
And so, I mean, but, you know, you've probably been in the position that I've been in when you go to teach it and not that many people show up, and you're thinking, wow, why are people not understanding? This is something we got to get out there. And it's probably the same thing that people in other fields think, you know, why isn't it as important to them as it is to me? And I think one of the things that's made you excel in what you do is just the passion.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that are paid to do what we do. And it's a 8 to 5, and they clock in and they do their job. And while they make headway, I think what puts you leaps and bounds above that is the fact that it's a passion.
Yeah.
It's not 5 o'clock here. And she's in the big city of Tooele tonight talking to me. I mean, there's plenty of other places she'd rather be tonight, but you're always willing.
Yeah, for sure.
I've drug her out to Windover, to Richfield.
We've gotten to go a lot of fun places.
And
I'm
so,
happy to do that.
I think it's amazing. So if you look back at your dad, keeping him in mind, let's talk about stigma, mental health, and acceptance.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Tell me, what would that have made a difference?
Huge difference. So, that's the thing that we have changed, right? The landscape in that realm is coming so far. We still have a ways to go, for sure. But my goodness, like we're talking about depression and addiction and anxiety and mental health conditions in a way we never had before. My dad was somebody who just didn't know what was even happening to him because you weren't educated, right? You didn't get a class that said, hey, here's the signs and symptoms of depression, or hey, here's what this can look like, when you start becoming addicted to those medications that I'm prescribing you. Like, we just didn't have those conversations. And so he just viewed himself, and we've seen that through the writings and stuff that we found, of course, after he died, of just worthless and weak, and those were things that we used to say to people, right? It's a moral failing, you're just being weak. Come on, suck it up. And so it was this internal struggle I watched with him where he just thought, I can't tell anybody what I'm really going through because you'll just judge me too. And, the things that did to him is it kept him from getting, right, appropriate help, treatment, diagnoses, support. And, I think of we as his family. Had we understood, had we known about his illness, if you have a loved one with diabetes or cancer, like they bring you in as a family and say, okay, here's how you're going to help support your loved one. Here's how you're going to help, manage their illness. And here's what you can expect. And, they educate you. Well, we weren't doing that with depression and anxiety. We're starting to. But we would have known how to support him. We would have known how to encourage him instead of us getting frustrated. I used to get so frustrated at him and be like, why can't you just get up? Get out of bed. What do you mean? I didn't understand how hard it was for him. Again, until I had it happen to me. And I think that's the issue, is we as a society wait until it happens to us. We don't take the initiative to understand, right? And that's what has to change, So I think we're making progress for sure, but there's so much more we could be doing. And it starts with that thing you mentioned, is just getting out, getting educated. Don't wait until it happens. Be on the forefront, be ahead of it so that if it does, you know what to do. That's what I would have given anything. If I'd have known how to respond to somebody who's in suicidal crisis, what to say to him, instead of the awful things that I did say, things could have been very different.
Well, and you look at it, how many times have you heard, I never thought this would happen in my family?
Sure.
And I go back to that because you hear it all the time. I never thought this was going to happen. I knew it was something that happened, but it never happened to us. And even dealing with what you were dealing with, him dealing with what he was dealing with, you probably still didn't think that day would come, that you'd have to walk down those 5 steps. And I think that's a tough thing. And so depression, and I always bring it up and saying, we know that in a person's lifetime, they're going to deal with severe depression. You're going to have bouts of it. It's going to come. Even if you're a happy person, it's going to come. But to me, it's kind of like you get strep throat, you go to the doctor, they give you the Z-Pack, 5 days, you're going to be back at it. Things are going to be good. But that first day when you go to the doctor, I'm a guy, so you get a cold and we think we're dying. But you go in, you get that Z-Pack, you're dying. Yeah. In order to get a guy to go to the doctor, he's got to feel like crap. And I think we need to let people know that. You know what? You are going to struggle. Might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but eventually it's going to hit you and you're going to go through a rough patch. But you're going to get through it. And so how's the best way to get that message out to people?
Again, I think it's what we've been doing, and what we just continue to do is just keep doing the education, keep having the conversation, Yes, we may only get 6 people at this one. Yes, we may only get 5 at this one. But, hey, that's 5 more people that can then, in fact, spread their little bit of knowledge into their circle of influence.
And if it's the one.
And if it's the one, it's the one, But we just have to continue to educate our communities. We're seeing that. It's starting to happen in schools now, right, where they're going to change and do curriculum now based on mental health. We're going to talk about what these warning signs can look like. Because the thing that's so unfortunate, and I saw this with our dad, and I've seen it even in myself, is when we don't understand the illness that we're dealing with, depression, anxiety, whatever it is, and we're not getting treatment, it gets worse. And they say that people will wait up to almost 10 years before getting a proper diagnosis with a mental health condition. That's like being stage 4.
Yeah.
We wait until it is so far gone that treatment isn't as effective, where if we got ahead of it sooner, if we recognized it right away, mean, if you recognize depression right away, you could treat it with diet, with exercise, with sunshine. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be on a medication and all these other things. There's things that you can do right away to help it if we recognize it soon enough. So,
but as that snowball starts rolling, it just gets bigger and worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, well, how can I word it to you? So what keeps you going? What keeps you going in this fight?
I think there's a lot of things that keep me going, and that kind of goes back to me learning my own self-care.
Mm-hmm.
It baffles my mind still to this day that we wait until a person has a suicide attempt before we say, hey, we should create a safety plan for you. Hey, let's talk about what we're going to do to keep you safe. Why don't we have that conversation before they ever get to the point of crisis, right? Yeah. And so, I have a safety plan today, right? I have things that I've identified as my reasons for living that I can go to, that I can look at. My kids, their names are tattooed on my wrist for a reason so that I can see visual reminders that they need me and they love me and I give them support. And that's a reason. My husband, my sobriety. There's so many things that are things that I've been able to overcome and see and experience joy in. Golfing, right? That's something that keeps me going. I mean, I have a list. Yeah, I go to the beach if I need to, but I definitely have learned that I have to take time out for me to do this. This work's not easy. And you know that. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's hard. It's sad, but then it's beautiful when you see people get help and get support and survive what they think was unsurvivable, and they make it through that, so it has both. Mm-hmm. For sure. But as you know, it's you got to put on that damn oxygen mask. That lady on the airplane wasn't kidding.
Taryn was my first phone call. I remember going out looking for a boy.
Yeah.
And I remember getting home to my house at 5:30 in the morning, and I was in the fetal position, bawling like a baby that we hadn't got there in time. And I remember she was my first call, and I'm like, what do you do? Because I knew you'd been there. And what a good support you were to me, because I was an idiot that morning, just going, what do you do? And it sucks, but you know what? And I remember telling my wife, I'm done.
Yep.
I'm not doing it. That's got to be the last time. And she kind of let me lay around in it for a minute, and then she says, well, if you don't do it, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
And I put an ad in the paper, nobody called. No. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things. So in Taryn's world, what do you want to see happen?
I want to see our world get to a place where, again, we treat behavioral health, our brains, the same way we treat every other, organ in our body. I want to see it be socially acceptable for men to cry, for women to lose their shit and not be called crazy. I want to see, again, we create this culture of vulnerability where we're willing to be open, where we're willing to talk about the real things, where we're willing to say when it's hard, and then there's a system in place to help us, because that's what we're lacking. We don't have access to care for people who need it in every state, in every city, in every camp. We don't have that. We don't have suicide safe care. For years, mental health professionals weren't even trained in how to work with suicidal individuals. Well, that's who you're going to. So if you're going to the person that doesn't know how to help you, we don't go to the hospital having a heart attack and they go, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have anybody that's on call right now, or that, you're going to have to wait 6 months to get in. Just deal with that. But we do that still with mental health. And so there's just so many things that need to happen. But I want to see us get to a place where, again, we as humans can just love on each other and be okay with each other. But then when we are in need, there's a system out there that's ready and can help us get through what we need.
So Taryn and I both grew up in Orem, Utah, and there's maybe a perfection problem down there.
Just a tiny one. So we wouldn't want to get a little bit of.
But I think that is, and maybe it's our culture, maybe it's everywhere, but wanting to be perfect, and you get a little bit of that on social media where people only show the good things, and I think that's kind of works against us in being able to be vulnerable and say, hey, this is where I'm at. It's a shitty day today, and I don't know how I'm going to get through it today. And I don't know. I don't know what else you can do other than to be the leader in that and be okay with saying, hey, this is where I'm at today.
Yeah.
Give me a minute.
Yeah.
And as more people do that, I hope that people say, you know what? If this person can do it, I can do it too.
Exactly.
And
that's what it's all about, right? Is that seeing somebody else and relating to somebody else. We see that be good and bad. We see that happen when suicide contagion. If a person can relate in a struggle and gravitate towards somebody in a struggle, well, then of course they can relate to somebody in a victory and gravitate towards that. So sharing those stories is what we need to see more of, so that people know, hey, right?
And I think I don't know how you teach empathy.
I know.
But wouldn't it be great if everybody weren't so worried about themselves that they could see other people? You hear that with Kevin Hines. You hear it with how many people that just felt like nobody noticed, nobody saw them. If we could train people to be empathetic and to actually care about someone other than themselves nonstop, maybe we should invent something.
I know,
curriculum on how to do that.
How to be an empathetic human.
So we've talked about this a little bit. In prevention, suicide prevention, I think so much of what we do talk about is hard and it's sad. It's a tough thing, and that's when we started doing this podcast. I thought, how many people are going to watch this? As I, tear up and we talk about sad things. But there really has, since 2002 when you started, has been some wins.
Oh, it's been huge wins, right?
Tell me
huge
about
wins.
it.
Just here in our state, alone, we've seen, legislation take place that again got teachers being trained and providing education in schools and making sure that, doctors and mental health professionals have the tools and training. Now we're looking at banning practices like conversion therapy and protecting our most vulnerable population, from horrible practices. We're seeing people in a way that we've never done before, and Utah also is a state that's starting to see a decline in the suicide death rate. All the work that people have been doing, and it's, again, like you said, it's a collective effort. Whenever I hear people be like, oh, this is our job, or this is what we do, I'm like, no one group can accomplish this. This takes everybody. This is all of God's kids trying to figure out how we make this work. And so it's been neat to see the collaboration that's taken place, in our state especially, amongst people. Things are changing. Things are definitely changing.
They are, and we've got the gun locks that are being given out, which is a big problem in the state of Utah. Just learning to store our firearms safely.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that still needs to have some work, but we're working on it. Today, I think I noticed, was it Virginia that just banned conversion therapy?
Yep, 20th state.
So, 20th state?
And Utah was 19. Like, look, we weren't dead last. We were like leading the pack.
Right in the middle.
It's awesome.
So, but honestly, there are things what do you want to see be our next win? What do you think we can do?
I would love to see so right now, there's a bill before our legislature that would increase access to services like I was talking, right? It would create these receiving centers, and that's a terrible word for them, but basically they would be like a mental health ER. And then, so as opposed to having to go to an emergency room when you're in crisis, have them put you in a gown, handcuff you to the bed because you're a danger, I can sit in a recliner, I can talk to you, I get to stay in my clothes, like providing spaces where people can be safe. This would be a center that you could be dropped off as opposed to being taken to jail if you're intoxicated and just need a chance to get back into your wits about you because you're sobered up. And, if you're in a crisis state, and just need a few hours to be in a safe place rather than on a 72-hour hold in a psych ward. Like, there's so many ways that we've treated people in crisis that haven't been helpful that these would help to do. So I want to see our state fund that. I want to see them make mental health a priority and say, it's going to cost us some money, but we're going to invest in it because we need to.
And, the option is you don't fund it and then people die.
We keep
that's the truth. I always say the other night, and Tracy will say, well, it wasn't the other night. It was like 9 months ago. Life flies by. But I remember a night when we had, I think, a 12-year-old from an elementary school here in Tooele that had attempted, and a girl at one of the high schools and a girl at another high school. And they all ended up at LDS hospital the same night. I went with one of the mothers. And as we sat in the emergency room, trying to figure out where those kids were going to be placed, what was interesting to me, it became really real when you have 3 kids. I mean, these are 3 kids. And one of them was transported to McCady Hospital in Ogden. One was transported to Provo Canyon Behavioral, and the other was to Highland Ridge. And so we have a shortage of beds. We have a shortage, we've got another big win, the Safe UT app. I mean, we've got the Safe UT app. But again, we've got to have places for those people.
I mean, we've provided these tools for people in crisis to reach out,
and
they're using them. But then where do we send you after? So you're
Exactly.
right. We can't keep telling people get help if we don't have a place for you to get help.
And I remember I got a phone call from Representative Elison. He had just come back, I think, from Nashville or from Tennessee, where he was touring these receiving centers. And he said, John, this is going to be a game changer. This is going to be really great. And I think they're going to be in what counties it goes from?
I don't know that they've identified counties yet, but for sure they would implement 2 new ones. But then they would increase access to mobile crisis teams in rural communities, which would be huge. Because we have access to them, here in Salt Lake and Provo,
But Tooele, we get left
well
a little bit left out. So we need to expand that area.
Richfield, you think of all these places that could benefit from having a service.
So you want to see that happen? Anything else that?
I want to see our society really just come together and love each other. I think that's my biggest right now. I'm so tired of the divide. I am such a passionate advocate for our LGBTQ community because it devastates my heart that we don't love and accept people for who they are, and allow people to just be comfortable in their own skin. And I am especially sensitive to transgender individuals because I think of the courage that it must take to go out into our world, knowing how you're going to be received and the things that people will say and do. And, I had a beautiful experience a couple weeks ago, and I was about to say the other night, but it wasn't
the other day.
And it was a few weeks ago, probably months ago now that I think about it. But anyway, I was eating tacos, one of my favorite things to do, with a transgender friend of mine, and of course, I see this little kid get up, and he's looking and kind of confused and saying something to his mom. And then our waitress comes over and she just continues to make the point to say, do you ladies need anything else? What can I get you ladies? And I just was like, yes. And I remember even a couple of weeks later, I'd gone in and had tacos again with my sisters, and that waitress was there. And I just had to go up to her and say, thank you. You using her pronouns, you affirming her identity is big. So why can't we do that? We don't have to understand. You don't have to have a belief system. You don't have to do anything other than just love and accept people for who they are and let them be. Just let them be.
And I think that's the problem is people say, well, this is how I feel about it. Well, that's great.
That's great.
You don't have
feel
to be
that way.
But you know what?
You don't have to be cruel or mean.
Exactly.
Because that's how you
feel.
And
I have a cousin that's transgender, and I've got family members that are gay. And I always tell people, what would the world be like if everybody was an accountant?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Boring as hell.
If everybody was an accountant or everybody was an attorney, we have a variety. There are people, and everybody brings something to the table. If you just let them shine, you have your strengths. I have my strength. Well, I have one, but but you know what I mean. Everybody has their strength. If you were unaccepting of somebody, you don't know what you're missing, what that person actually brings to the table. You've got to be secure, I think, enough in yourself that you can love people and say, you know what, this person's amazing at this, and there hasn't been one person in that group that I haven't thought, wow, you know what, there is something special about everybody. Sure. We started a group out here called Unconditional, and it's for the LGBT community in Tooele County, and there's some amazing people, and you gotta love them. I don't know how. I don't know why. Hard. Yeah, exactly.
I have a shirt that has Jesus on it, and it says, I never said that. And that's what we need to remember. He never told us not to love people. He said, love one another.
That's the truth. It's the truth. And we all know how he would handle it.
Yes.
That's you have to just be, just open up your arms and love everybody. Yeah. What else do you think? Anything else come to mind? Things that
I could go down a list of things I want to see in this world, but
Well, you know what? We need to get it out there so people realize.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think a lot of people are blinded to the fact that, oh, I didn't even think about that.
yeah.
There's so much out there.
There is. One of the things that I get to do a lot of, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, is I get to go provide suicide prevention education to the employees at the road home, and to work with folks who are working again with our homeless community, and what an amazing gift they give day in and day out. And again, those folks will tell you, if you just see me, I know, I might have my hand out to you for money, but look at me in the eyes, see me, say hi to me, acknowledge me. And there's so much we can do.
And so many of those people are in a bad spot. Yeah. They're in a bad spot. Yeah. Maybe it's addiction. Maybe it's poor life choices. But you know what? Are you going to ignore them? Yeah. Are you going to turn the sprinklers on them? Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that so many people have been there. I know many. I know you know many that have been there and have come out of it. Thinking of one person in particular, I just talked to him the other day on the phone. Life found him there in the Rio Grande district and struggling. He was homeless. He is now working in a recovery center in St. George. He is doing amazing things and trying to make a difference. Yeah. And I think, again, don't take a snapshot of somebody at their worst and think that that's where they're going to remain. There's so many things that can change over time, and then people just need to be given a chance. Yeah. So, I agree.
Yeah, for sure.
So, let's see. So, legislation this session. We've got the receiving centers. What else?
There's several that we've proposed. There's work that needs to be done around extremist protection orders, and unfortunately, there's a lot of folks here in Utah who won't allow that to even be given a hearing or see the light of day. But it's a conversation we need to be willing to have. We're not trying to take away people's Second Amendment right and take your guns. We're just saying that if a family member has a family member who's in crisis, they've tried every other means possible to distance the person from their firearm, and it's not an option, and they know they're at risk and that they've maybe threatened or, that they need to be able to have a tool to mitigate that risk and temporarily, again, that's the key term, temporarily separate them. I think of the analogy of drunk driving because it's the same thing. If you were trying to get in your car intoxicated, you bet your butt I'm going to come over and say, no. I'm not going to judge you and yell at you. I'm going to tell you I love you. Yeah. And I'm going to hold on to these for right now until you're feeling better. And we can do that with firearms. We can do that with other means. We can say, hey, right now I see that you're struggling. You're not safe. So until you're in a better space, let me look after you. Let me take care of you. Let me help you. Let me maybe hold on to that.
And that's a hard discussion to have.
For sure.
So many people, want to have them 24/7.
Sure.
We've got the concealed carry permit, and people want to have them. I understand wanting to have them, but if somebody's hurting, it would be the exact same thing as taking their keys. Yeah,
and just having that willingness. I had to have that willingness for myself. I grew up in homes with firearms and had a firearm for a long time as a single mother, for protection. But when my brain gets to a space where it's not well, I know I can't have that thing in my home. And so I take the steps to say, hey, go away for a while, and I give it to somebody, and I've gone years now where I don't have one, and I haven't needed it. But I just think it's important that we be willing to have some of those harder conversations, and again, we've been working as a state. We have a firearm work group where we're working with the gun owning community and people within that, because we want to understand, we're not trying to infringe on people, but let's look at where we can come together. Instead of looking at our differences, what can we agree on? And what we agree on is safety. We want to keep people safe. So what can we do to work towards that?
And I think that's kind of been a snapshot of our whole nation.
Right?
You're either over here, you're over here, but nobody's willing to come together and in the middle. And I think so many problems would be solved if we could just say, you know what? Yeah, I've got a little wiggle room here. Yeah. Little wiggle room can make a big difference.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Absolutely. What else? Is there anything?
Well, there's another one that would have been awesome had it gone through. We wanted to strengthen mental health parity, so just ensuring that insurance companies are following the MAPIA guidelines that have been in effect since 2008, but making sure that they're providing accurate and adequate coverage for mental health services. It didn't make it out of committee, which is unfortunate because it's really a no-brainer. We're asking insurance companies to do what they should be doing. If they allow you to have 20 visits for your, your heart, your lungs, your liver, then you should get 20 visits for your brain. You can't limit that kind of stuff. So We'll go back. We'll keep working at it.
Chisel away at that one and make it doable.
Yeah.
So here's and those are really good things. I think if we can get some of those to go through,
For sure.
we'll know a little bit better here in the coming weeks. But fingers crossed, we make a difference in that area. So tell me something. If you were to go back to being a child, is there anything along that journey that you would change? I mean, you look back and so much of what the good and the bad that has happened really has made you who you are.
Yeah,
and you're pretty amazing.
I have a mantra I stole from one of my mentors, and it's a mantra of no regrets, right? I don't live my life with regrets. I don't, because I can't change it. And you're right. Had I not gone through all of the things that I did, I wouldn't be who I am today. I think the only thing I would say I would change would be maybe how I talked to myself as that little child, that maybe I told myself that I was worth it, that I did matter, that I believed those things as opposed to the lies, because that would have made a huge difference, right? Had I believed that it did matter that I tell somebody what was happening, that I was worth having it not happen again. And so I think those are the only things I would say, is maybe just how I talk to myself I would change. But the rest of it has been what it, lessons, and I'm here today because of it. So
yeah, I was going to say, but at 8 years old, you did everything that you could have.
I did what I could.
That you could have done. But again, talking to our kids, making sure that they're aware. Hey, you can come to me.
Yeah, and having those conversations and being open for sure.
And I think we have changed. I mean, if I look at, nothing against my parents for how they parented, because it was an era.
Different time,
but you know what? It was a different time, and there's things that I feel like maybe I've done a little better in. Maybe some things I've done worse in.
I can
but
relate.
but you know what? I think we're doing better at having those discussions.
For sure.
I know that I don't think I'm as scary to come to as maybe if my kids are listening, shut up. No, but seriously, I think you have to be prepared, not living with blinders on, and realizing, you know what, you're going to get some bad news from your kids, and you got to be able to
just love them through it,
to rise to the occasion, and you know what, and so much of it, when you look back, now that my kids are raised, your kids are raised, now you can kind of look back and you think some of the things that were going to be earth-shattering were just a minute in time. Nobody even knows those things now, and
that's so true.
And we get through it, and I think although some of those experiences you had were life-shattering and hard and difficult, and people will look at those things, they have made you so strong that you've done amazing things. I don't know anybody that's done the amount of amazing things that you've done, and
I got a lot of bad karma to make up for.
whatever. But
trying to balance out the sheet.
Yeah. I don't think you have anything to worry about.
I think that's again, we're joking earlier about how do we teach empathy. Life taught me, right? Life taught me how to have empathy. Yeah. So.
Well, and I we talked about the mourning with people that mourn versus mourning for those people. You go back to the Jesus that says, I didn't say that. He ended up going to Lazarus' house to Mary and Martha, and Lazarus had already died, and he began to cry watching those women cry. And I think that's the whole story of it. If you walk in and you don't feel what people are feeling, you need to
walk out.
Yeah, exactly. But you can tell the people that their heart is in it, and that they feel it, and they might not know exactly what that person's feeling.
Sure.
But they come pretty close to the understanding of it. And I think you're an example of that every day. So I've seen you with people that have recently lost somebody. I've seen you help families, and I don't think there's anybody better.
Oh, you're kind.
So, tell me, see, she's going to make me cry, so.
Sorry, I'm doing it too.
Tell me this. if somebody that's watching this podcast is struggling, what advice could you give them?
Oh, the only advice is find somebody you trust. Find somebody you trust that you can tell, whatever it is. Whatever thoughts are up in here, get them out of your mouth to somebody that you can trust and be safe with. And if you don't feel like you have that person, then that's where, again, there's tools like the Lifeline or Safe UT, because there's such power in just speaking it, right? Speaking our truth, getting it out. Again, you're not going to be able to fix it in that moment, but we can fix it together.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to do it by yourself. You don't have to solve it by yourself. You don't have to struggle with it by yourself. Einstein says that quote that I love that says, that the brain that creates the problem can't solve it. Mm-hmm. And that's why we get stuck in our head and we're all like, trying to figure out the solution. We can't. But the minute we utter it to someone else, they'll go, oh, well, didn't you think of? And you're all, no, I didn't. But that's the beautiful part about opening up to others is we can maybe help together, right? Come to solutions or ideas that we hadn't thought of. But, live on.
And there's healing in saying your story.
Live on, because if you're gone, there's nothing you can do. We can't fix it.
No.
But if you're here, we can. We can try together.
And I think most people that maybe have left that way, mm-hmm. as they've moved on to just another place, mm-hmm. I think they realize that you know what, like raising your kids and thinking something was a crisis that really mm-hmm. was not that big of a deal later on.
Sure.
I think there is that moment of clarity where they go, you know what, we could have got through that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you are struggling, if you're watching this podcast and you are struggling and you're having those thoughts, find somebody you trust, reach out to them. Call the Lifeline, 1-800-273-TALK, or 1-800-273-8255. There's a reason you're here. There's a reason we need you here. Talked about everybody brings something to the table, mm-hmm. and we don't want to miss out on what you bring to the table. So make sure you talk to somebody.
Yeah.
If you're sitting with a family that has lost somebody, what's the best advice you can give that family?
Well, you should just tell them the same things that you told yourself in those moments of breathe. Breathe, eat, rest when you can. Be gentle with yourself. The guilt will come, the coulda, shoulda, woulda will come, and it doesn't need to, but it's part of this journey. It's unique to suicide grief, but know that you did the best you could with what you knew, and while, yes, you might learn things, you might come across things that you could have done different, use those as opportunities for the next person you see. Because while we can't go back and save the people that we've lost, we absolutely can use that stuff to be helpful to people here today who can still be helped. And I just say be gentle, be gentle with yourself and allow yourself to feel whatever it is you feel, because it's a journey. That's the best word for it. You don't get through it, you don't get over it, but it's a journey, and it'll get different. And it's something that, again, we have people to walk it with us. We don't have to do it by ourselves.
So we need closing thoughts. Anything that you thought of as you were driving over here?
Oh my gosh, I just thought of how amazing it's going to be when spring gets here.
I was feeling it today.
I'm ready for the long, dark nights of winter to be done. But you know what? That's the best parallel to what we're talking about here tonight, is even the longest, darkest night will end. The sun always comes, it always rises. And so just giving yourself that time and allowing for that chance for it to rise again. The sun will rise and we get what we make of it. Whatever I make with that day, that's where I have power. And so sometimes it's just remembering to be in the moment that you're in, be present, right? Be where your feet are, and just wait for that light to come, because it always does. It always does. Even the yuckiest storm ends sometime. So just hold on.
The blue sky feels good.
Oh, it feels so good.
I was in Park City today, and there's a lot of snow up there, but that just having the blue sky, mm-hmm. I was like, I'm feeling it. I'm ready.
Yep, me too.
And I get to go to Moab in another week.
Oh,
and work in Moab to work. But that's going to feel good.
Desert energy, that'd be fun.
Exactly. So if somebody is moved by what you've said tonight, wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
So you could reach out to me. Just really, probably email is probably the best way. I totally as a boundary for myself. Took Messenger off my phone and devices from Facebook only because I needed to not be accessible 24/7, because I'm that person that if you message me and you're in trouble, I'm going to respond, even if it's 2 in the morning.
I know the feeling.
But yeah, so our chapter page, afsp.org, is where you can find my information, or just email thiatt@afsp.org. But I'm definitely accessible. And
Anything coming up with AFSP you want to share?
oh my goodness, we have Campus Walk happening up at Weber State University in April. We do our big Ride to Fight Suicide coming up in June. Mary Ann Cook, that lady, I love her. She is just a force. And then, of course, our walks and things will happen again in the fall. But between then, we'll do programming and teach classes and try to get people to come. We'll educate you. So,
well, hopefully I get to go do one of those trainings with you.
Yeah,
She's my favorite person to train with.
Yeah, for sure.
I love it. Well, guys, thanks for spending an hour with us and talking about these things. Thanks for watching the podcast. If you like the podcast, please hit subscribe and then rate and review it. I would love to hear your thoughts, what you'd like to see on this. I hope to bring even other amazing friends and allow everybody the chance to meet these amazing people I get to work with and share my time with. You can reach out to me at lifesworthlivingfoundation@gmail.com. Let me know your thoughts, and again, share this podcast. If you have friends that are struggling, somebody that you think that this would be something that they would need to hear, please share it. It's the only way we get the message out, is to share it. Taryn can't come to every one of your houses, so she's only going to do this way. But really, that's the truth. We're lucky and we get to meet with these people that do amazing things, but not everybody has that opportunity. And so that was the whole point in this podcast, is sharing that circle of friends. Share the podcast. Share it with those that it'll make a difference in. And again, I'm your host, John Gossett with Life's Worth Living Foundation. And again, another shout out to GTM Builders for allowing us this place
beautiful.
to share. Beautiful. If you're interested in building or getting a new home in Twilla County, they are your people. I think they'll even leave Twilla County if you need to have a home as well. So reach out to them, GTM Builders, and they do build a beautiful home, and we're grateful for them and their willingness to know that this message is important enough to give us this space. Again, whatever it is that's brought us together and whatever has made you watch this podcast, just know that I'm glad you're here. And I love you. Thanks, you guys. Take care.
Thanks.